Hello, everyone. I'm Pavlas Varsatskas, and I'm your host. This is Prometheus and the ecosystem community call. We follow Prometheus code of conduct here, so please be nice to one another. This is being recorded and will be published on YouTube. Today, we will be giving away Prometheus Swag to active participants. In order to qualify, you just need to ask a question. Our co-host, Matthias, will help us randomly pick a person at the end of the meeting. Also, all the questions, we will go through questions at the end. We have quite a big agenda today, so let's start with Prometheus. Bryan, take away.
Yeah, so the next Prometheus release is Prometheus 2.20, and there's a few features coming in there. So there's 2 new service discoveries. And it's been a while since we've had any new ones, and those are DigitalOcean and Docker Swarm. We also had Marco, who's with Cortex or Thanos, I can never remember. Also found a nice little optimization in some of our bit twiddling internals, which will make PromQL a bit faster, which is always nice. And also then there was a new aggregation added to Prometheus, which doesn't do anything new, but will just help make certain, well, counts of counts more self-documenting. And the next release, which you can always find in the release MD file inside Prometheus, is on the 15th of this month. So that's in 2 weeks' time. That's when it'll start. It'll probably be released about a week after that. The next item, I believe, is also mine, which is the PromCon update. So if you don't know, I managed call for papers and figuring out the schedule. So we do currently have a rough schedule. We're just figuring out exact dates. Hopefully that'll all go online now, well, today hopefully. But we're looking at the same week as the original PromCon, and it will be, it'll be a bit shorter than a normal PromCon. I'm currently looking at spreading it out over 3 days, and as usual, people will be able to submit lightning talks on the fly. That's probably going to be a Google form or something. I've yet to figure it out, but look in the usual places for information.
Awesome. Yeah, so I think next up is Prom Label Proxy, move to Prometheus community. Not sure who added that.
I think Simon was going to talk about this because he did the majority of the work, but I don't see him in the call right now.
I actually added this for the team.
If someone can promote him, he's on the attendee list.
Perfect. Yeah, I'm going to do that.
Done. I think I've added him.
Yeah.
Perfect.
Okay. Sorry, had some troubles with my Zoom settings. Yeah. So PromLabel Proxy is a project that started inside OpenShift. So in the context of Kubernetes, the idea is that it allows to enforce the presence of certain labels in PromQL expressions. So say that you have a very simple expression like up, query for the up matrix, and you want to enforce that it's only for a given namespace. Then PromLabel Proxy will take that query, inject the label selector that you defined in the configuration of PromLabel Proxy, and it will forward that query to Prometheus, basically. So it's kind of an enforcement of what you can see, which metrics and which query you can run in Prometheus. So as I said, initially it was done for OpenShift, but the need is not limited to that. Basically, you can configure any label names that you want to enforce. So yeah, that's why we moved it to Prometheus community, because we felt it was useful not only for our use case, but more generally for people that want to have some kind of soft tenancy when accessing Prometheus metrics. So initially it started for PromQL queries, but if you look at the project itself, it has also been extended to support the rules API in Prometheus, the alerts API in Prometheus. So the same principle it will enforce a certain value for a label, and also the silences in Alert Manager API. So basically, if you find it useful, try it. We are open to suggestions and improvement, obviously. And yeah, that's basically it.
Awesome. Thanks for the announcement. Yeah, if anyone has a question, please put them either on our Google Doc or just Zoom them and we will go through them at the end. So next up is announcement about monitoring mixins.dev.
Quickly chiming in, as some of the announcements from the ecosystem went quite long last time, I want to stress that everybody gets 3 to 5 minutes max. So please keep it brief so everybody can participate and we have enough time for questions at the end. Thank you.
Awesome. Yeah, so Pavel, if you can take away, would be awesome.
Yeah, so as for monitoring mixins, this is a concept that we know for like 2 years or so, but till now, the discoverability of new mixins was kind of hard. You need to know where they are, and if you want to use them, you need to have a fairly good knowledge of JSONet. So I created a website that is mostly gathering the default monitoring mixins and generating them and producing the view for generated already consumable mixins, which is alerts, recording rules, and dashboards. This is already, you can already see it at monitoringmixins.dev. And I hope that if there will be new mixins coming in, I will just be updating this. Currently, it's a manual process, but soon it will be automated.
Awesome. Yeah, let's move on to supporting for SLO latency generation. I think, Matthias, this is yours.
Yeah, that's mine. Yeah, exactly. So kind of like in the same realm, trying to make the JSON stuff that we do at Red Hat a bit more accessible. So I, during PromCon, announced this PromTools SLO generator. And so far, this has only been supporting generating the multi-error burn rate alerts for errors. And just last night, essentially, I finally merged the support to also be able to generate rules on like 99% of your requests need to be faster than, I don't know, 1 second, for example. And if you like have too many requests constantly that burn error budget in terms of like being too slow, then you can alert on this as well. And hopefully I can also soon push a combination of both, which use histograms and kind of like the status code in histograms to actually get both of them like combined in a really cool scenario that actually Bjorn taught me a while back. But so for now, you can do that for errors. You can also now do it for latencies, and hopefully it helps someone. So give me your feedback and I will try to improve on top of that going forward. And that's kind of it. So going further or going to the next topic, that's the Thanos 0.13 release.
Cool, and that would be me. So yeah, some news from Thanos. Basically, I think the newest release candidate that is happening today. So basically, most important news from Thanos is basically, I think Thanos Receive component is production ready. I know Red Hat folks has been running it for a while in production, and they basically fixed a bunch of bugs and stuff like that. So basically, if you want to run Thanos sort of as a monitoring metrics as a service kind of thing, where you just push your own metrics, you can use Receive. Usually people convert to Receive component when we have like issues with our Thanos sidecar model, when you have like a large number of Thanos sidecars and sort of you start getting those connection issues, or basically long delays on like basically querying all the leaf nodes in basically Thanos network mesh. So yeah, definitely check out basically Receive if it solves your use case. Yeah, also Marco has added memcached meta and chunk caching. Amazing piece of work. If you use memcache, definitely try it. Also, we fixed a bunch of core issues like some overlapping blocks, deduplication bug, also some performance improvements. And on the last note, we recently passed SIG observability due diligence review. So, which means that we're gonna be continuing on to basically CNCF TOC review. And after that, we might be moving on to basically changing our CNCF stage, basically promoting us from sandbox to incubation. I will link you to the due diligence doc I and Bartek basically wrote if anybody is interested. So yeah, thank you. And on next topic, I think is M3DB release. I don't believe Rob is on the call. Let me quickly check.
I haven't
I'm
seen
not
them.
mistaken,
It's also
this
like
time.
in the middle of the night for the
Yeah.
US, right? So
I see.
I guess we can quickly read it if there's anything to read. So there was a new release with M3DB that comes with global query resource limits and multi-tenant read-write auto-label headers. Sounds really cool. So if you want to learn more, I guess all we can do for now is redirect you to the release notes. And then hopefully in the next call, you might be able to tell us a bit more again. Yeah.
Awesome. So next up is Cortex newest release.
Hi, I'm Bryan Boreham. I am the release shepherd for Cortex 1.2. So Marco is going to talk a little bit about the changes to the experimental TSDB store, where it was probably where the most change has happened. Outside of that, my favorite change is that it no longer prints all of the flags if you make a small mistake, because we had, I don't know, we had like more flags than there are atoms in the sun or something like that. So it used to annoy me. So that's my favorite change. Yeah, a huge number of bug fixes, incremental improvements. It is built with Go 1.14, which I think makes it a little bit smaller, a little bit faster. And I shall turn over to Marco for his additions.
So very quickly, in the block storage, we backported the shared cache based on memcached for metadata and chunks caching, which we introduced in Thanos first. And we have also introduced limits in terms of maximum series per tenant, which we can ingest and keep in memory in the ingesters, and max series per metric name and tenant, which were missing in the block storage. One of the major probably changes are that we introduced a consistency check that we run at query time to make sure that all the expected blocks have been queried. Because there may be some edge cases when, due to blocks sharding occurred in the last few seconds, we may actually miss to query some blocks through the store gateways. And basically what we want to have is guarantee correctness for each query. And if this consistency check fail, we try to refetch missing series from missing blocks across different store gateways based on the replication factor configured. And if at the end of this process, the consistency checks still fail, we do fail the entire query instead of returning partial results. I'm not sure if Bryan mentioned, but the gossip support has been marked stable. And I think those are the main changes.
Awesome, nice work. Next up is Prometheus operator.
Yeah, so I'm gonna do that one again. So Prometheus operator version 0.40 was released by Lily a couple of days ago, and most notably, if you just run one replica of the alert manager, we finally disabled the high availability mode because like it's just one replica. Additionally, there are a bunch of things for the Thanos sidecar. So we added a minimum time argument. Then there's now the possibility to actually set a scrape timeout globally via configuration parameters. So you don't need to do it per service monitors the way that I see this. We also added an enforced sample limit, which again, like globally enforces a sample limit per target. And then last but not least, we also added the ability to exclude rules from namespace label enforcements. So a bunch of things. If you want to learn more, again, go to the release, learn about these, and come and talk to us on GitHub or the Kubernetes Slack in the Prometheus operator channel, actually. So feel free to reach out.
Awesome. Now we are moving on to questions. The first one is from Harshitha. I think you're live. Do you want to ask your question?
Sure. So it's like we're trying to implement delete API in Thanos. So we just wanted to quickly go through the Prometheus delete API, and we just wanted to know why we were Prometheus was considering 5% as a specific percentage for having blocks to be compacted when considering deletions in Prometheus.
So working off memory here, that number was just a number Fabian chose a few years back. So it's a number, and like, I'm not going to claim it's the right number, but the concern is if you were to do it just because there was a single deletion of some single series, you have to rewrite the entire block, which is expensive, at least for Prometheus. On the other hand, if you don't delete things, then it's going to use up disk space. So those are the trade-offs. That's just a number Prometheus chose. If it is the wrong number, we should change that, but no one has ever complained. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, that makes
I
sense.
just promoted Gautam. He said he actually chose that number. Maybe Gautam, you want to speak up, or?
Yeah, I found that pure. I wasn't sure.
Yeah, it's just a number that we chose, as Bryan said. Like, so essentially, we don't want to compact blocks if you delete one series, because that might mean you write too many things. So we are hoping that if you delete one or two series of very few number of series, in future compactions, they will be deleted anyways. So to force compactions, you need to delete a certain threshold, and we chose that threshold as 5%. So if it's not the right threshold, we can change it, but nobody complained so far.
It pretty much answers. We just wanted a general percentage to be considered for Thanos. So I think maybe we should first start with 5%. So, thanks.
Perfect. Okay. With that, we can move on to the next question. So it says, hi, I'm a software developer intern from AWS. I'm going to implement C++ Prometheus exporter for OpenTelemetry. We have a question about the HTTP server support. In Java and Python, OpenTelemetry Prometheus exporter do not have an HTTP server inside, and they make use of the server provided by the Prometheus client. For Node.js and Go, on the other hand, they support HTTP endpoints inside the exporter. What is the best practice for supporting the HTTP server from the Prometheus perspective? We noticed that C++ Prometheus client also has an exposer class to work as a server. Do you recommend using the exposer class directly?
This sounds like a bit too specific a question. I'd have to actually dig into the code. So in general, the thing is that it depends on the language as to whether a client library is going to have a HTTP server. So Go happens to be designed that it basically comes with a HTTP server out of the box. So there's no need for the Go client to do anything. In the case of Java, requires a bit of work to hook one together, so it has one. Python, yeah, there's also one kind of included. C++, I'd have to check which C++ client, because I know there's at least two of them out there. And it probably just depends on your preferences. But I would presume if you're writing an exporter, you need a HTTP server somewhere. So use whatever framework you normally use for HTTP stuff and just make sure it works with whatever client library you're using. I can't, unfortunately, give better advice without looking at the code.
Also, one note regarding OpenTelemetry specifically, as far as I know, the main collecting is still deltas, which means you can run into timing issues once you recalculate this into counters. So just be aware of that pitfall.
Okay, perfect. Where is the best to follow up on that? I guess like sending an email to the Prometheus users or developers mailing list?
Prometheus developers list, I guess.
Yeah.
But yeah, this sort of question, it's like, how do I hook into my HTTP server? The general answer is make it work however you need to make it work.
That's a good answer for sure. Okay, Puff, do you want to do the next one?
Yeah. Hey, so we have a question from Rob, I think from M3DB. Are folks open to a new Prometheus read API that performs streaming responses consumable by Spark Presto? Also may need to think not just about reading, but also supply at least some rudimentary functions, like at least rate or increase, since SQL doesn't have an easy way to perform those operations, and analytics becomes difficult if you can't sum up counts in a time window.
So I can try an answer to this. Like, there's not enough detail to answer this particularly because I don't know what Spark and Presto consume. So like, we already support some streaming inserts of the remote read endpoint, but that is raw data, so it's not going to have queries. So I'm going to guess, this is a guess, that you're looking over time windows, in which case write some form of adapter that does multiple query ranges and feed it in. If you're trying to do it series by series rather than over time, that would require a new API of some form. And I personally would prefer we, use the existing APIs that are there rather than, adding, analytics specific stuff there, because Prometheus can provide raw data in at least 2 ways already and build on top of that. But I think this kind of needs more detail to know exactly what we currently have and what it doesn't provide. Because I would suspect we probably have what's already needed.
Yeah, I feel kind of similar. I would suggest that maybe write kind of the shim first, and if what you need, if the existing APIs don't already support everything that you need, then I think that's kind of discussable, right? But there's a number of systems that would want to integrate with Prometheus, and it doesn't really make sense to integrate with all of them. We have an API, but if it doesn't provide the functionality required for these systems, then that's something that can be discussed. Whatever an addition might look like would then need to be discussed, obviously. But yeah, that's the way that I would suggest to go and try it.
Awesome. Matthias, want to go with the next question?
Yeah. So next one is, I'm also an intern working on OpenTelemetry, and I'm working on an exporter that sends data directly to a remote storage. In the process, I referenced the configuration of remote write and notice relabeling can be done during the remote write. I understand relabeling is useful when scraping, so what's the use case when writing? Is it used to provide information to the storage backend, or has it something to do with the internals of Prometheus?
Okay. So the reason that I added relabeling to remote write, aside from the fact that relabeling is everywhere, you cannot escape it, is so that if you only want to send a subset of metrics to the remote endpoint, like if you don't want to send everything, but just want to send things from recording rules, you can use a keep action to do that. The actual replace action, would hope is not used much, but basically it's so you can restrict what time series are actually sent to remote storage. That's its primary purpose.
We actually make use of this exact use case, so we're happy that it is there for this exact reason.
Yeah, I think one of the use cases for replace was anonymizing using the modulus function.
Cool. I think that answers the question. We have a next question from Ben. Do you want to go ahead and ask it?
Sure. So there's been a couple of different posts on the mailing list about the interaction between the storage size blocks and the storage-based retention and the time-based retention. And with long storage retentions and longer block sizes, you can end up in a case where too many compactions happen, and now you've got a short time window, but a long, but you've compacted like 30 or 40% of your data, and then the size-based retention kicks in and deletes a huge chunk of data that you weren't expecting. And also, so I was thinking maybe we should unhide the max block duration to allow easier tuning of the block size. Also, this is a standard flag that Thanos uses to make the max block size match the min block size.
Yeah, which I really prefer it didn't do. But to provide context, the min and max block flags exist for basically load testing of Prometheus. And
yes, but they are also extremely useful for other situations. So it's not.
Just give me a second to explain. So they exist for that, and most users attempting to change min are basically tying themselves into knots. So now, in the case of this particular issue, just thinking about it there, I think we should try to find something that solves this without the users having to pass an additional flag. Like, we can be smart enough. The problem is that they're independent, but like one of the things we do is that the max block size under the covers is set to whichever is the smaller of about 21 days and 10% of the time range, which is actually a suggestion Ben had. And we could probably do something smart, making sure that no block ends up more than 10% of the size. It would probably have to be in the TSDB or something. We could probably do something to make sure that basically, hey, this block would be bigger than 10%. Like, the only issue here actually is the tombstones, but 5% we can live with. So like, I would suggest we look into that rather than, and making it 10% of your total storage. That seems fine. Like, it's not half your database, which is what these users are running into. And that way it just works with no additional configuration, which will be nice.
One thing I proposed a while ago was actually changing the 10% to 5%. So for example, 21 days is 5% of 365 days. So by lowering that max, we reduce the number of very, very early compactions for smaller databases. So if you've got, say, a 30-day retention, we don't end up compacting a 21-day block in a 30. I think that would happen. I'm trying to remember what if you have like a moderate size time retention, like 30 or 60 days, you'll end up with 21-day blocks, and that might be too much retention. So reducing from 10% to 5% might help with this.
No. So it's 10% at a time. So if you have a 30-day one, for example, it'll end up with a 3-day max block size, because that's how the math works. So yeah, I don't think that change, at least it doesn't work that way. So maybe you're talking about something else?
Maybe it's more, it helps with like more medium range, like 90-day.
Yeah, that would be 9 days, but that should be fine still.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think, like, at least in other conversations with other TSDB stuff, I realized that one of the reasons we changed Prometheus 1 to Prometheus 2 was to reduce how many times we rewrite the data, because the Prometheus 1 design would rewrite it 10 times, and also in ways that required tons of IOPS. It turns out Prometheus 2 is currently rewriting things 13 times, so we kind of missed that goal. So like, one of the things we might want to do is, right now we always take 2 blocks and merge them into 1. And I think one of the things Tom mentioned in the past was we should be using 4, because apparently that's optimal per the research. So maybe that's something else to look at, because that would also, save all the rewrites and not take out SSDs, although nowhere near as bad as Prometheus 1 did. Because it turns out modern SSDs don't have as much life as you think, unfortunately, even MLC.
So it seems like there are a couple of use cases that are worth covering, and some of them seem to happen to be solvable with the flag, but not necessarily. It doesn't necessarily align with kind of the strategic way. So I would suggest that we can maybe move this to the developers mailing list and discuss a little bit further. I think the use case is sound, but the strategy kind of needs to be discussed.
Yeah, that sounds good.
Yeah. Yeah, like in general, let's avoid adding flags for things if we can, if we don't have to.
Awesome.
Okay, perfect.
Yeah.
So the next question I think is by Jürgen. How would the monitoring mixin dev and PromTools dev work together? Are they intended to be used together, or are those two completely separate approaches that will also stay independent from each other? Would be great to generate also dashboards out of the rules from the PromTools dev rules. So the first part of the question, maybe Pavel, you want to talk about that?
Yeah, so as for the first part, Prometheus tools dev is for generation part, where you can use it to generate alerts based on your SLOs or rules. And as for monitoring mixins dev, this is only the presentation part, where you already have created some mixin and want to present it in the generated form. So those are two separate projects. They can work together if you create something and add it there. And they are not even the different approaches. They are basically for something different. As for the second part, Matthias, I think it's...
Yeah, so yeah, like that's exactly how I see it as well. So essentially, the SLO lib sonnet is a library as like SLO, and then the lib sonnet part is basically a JSON library. So like any mixin can import the SLO lib sonnet library and make use of that to generate like for the specific application rules and alerts for that use case, right? So the web UI that I built is just like some ad hoc, like you want to like maybe try something out, or you don't want like the full JSON approach and just copy paste something into your stack. So definitely, like I think there are some mixins already using the SLO lib sonnet. I think, yeah, I started using it in the Kubernetes mixin, but then for the API server I went super specific. So I removed it again because it was too specific. But yeah, like generally, it is intended to be included in basically all the mixins out there. And for the generating dashboards, that's something that I pretty much already put in. It just needs more dashboards, more panels, more graphs. And it's kind of tricky to generate the dashboards for a specific application, because like it always depends on your application, right? So what I do is just like generate for example, like a graph panel, but then you need to kind of include it in like an entire dashboard that you somehow consume. So that's kind of up to the person implementing the dashboard for the most part. Like it's pretty low level, the SLO lib sonnet stuff, but like the PromTools dev should kind of like at least get people started with a simple approach. So I hope that answers the question. And then going on to the last question, does Cortex 1.2 have the Alert Manager UI supported?
So I could take that. I typed in the box, but yeah, maybe, so there is a UI. I mean, it's basically the Prometheus Alert Manager UI tweaked to be multi-tenant, and the Prometheus Alert Manager UI is I think quite minimal. You know, it will show you what's firing. It will let you put a silence in. So all of that works inside Cortex, and it works multi-tenant. If you were hoping for something more than that, then probably not. And it hasn't changed in a long while, as far as I can remember.
Awesome. I think that answers the last question. I think it's time to roll for Swag. Basically, Matthias, if you can do the honors.
Sure. roll a dice.
I could get an actual dice.
I mean, you can, yeah, you wanted to do that up front for a long time, so sure. We just need 3 people.
Okay. 1d4. Oh, it's a d3 now. Oh, my d3 is somewhere else.
Yeah.
Oh, God. Let's see.
I'm not sure if that's...
It wasn't a skill. 2 is what it came out as.
2.
Yeah.
Awesome.
2, so yeah.
Yang Hu. Yeah, just ping me on.
Swag.
Yeah, you want swag? Ping me on CNCF Slack, and we will get that sorted. Okay, so thank you, everyone. I think this is it. Our community meeting is over. I'll see you next month.
See ya. Bye-bye.
Thanks, everyone. Bye-bye.